Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got an email from Richard Jordan. He says, here are a couple new things you might want to be aware of that I tried to send you on Facebook. By the way, you guys, to contact me, the best way is email. I know I have my Facebook account. I have Instagram. I have Twitter. I have TikTok. But it's so hard for me. This entire channel is basically me biting off more than I can chew. I receive thousands of emails and messages from every direction, and I wish that I could just individually respond to every single one, but I can't. And I can't get help because some people have recommended, hey, get somebody to help you with your emails or whatever. It wouldn't help because, for one, they wouldn't know how to sort through them or pick out what I think is relevant because only I know what I think is relevant, and it's not plausible. I have my wife, but I wouldn't be able to do it. Even if she was going through and stuff, it still wouldn't help because it's still all bottlenecked at me. So anyway, I do what I can, but thank you everybody for sending messages. Let me continue here. So he leaves a link for an Israel 365 article that says here in the link, leading Italian parliamentarian Rome wants to return temple vessels to Israel. Which, what? I didn't see that. I'm pretty good with keeping on top of Israel 365. If you didn't know, I support a number of their charities in the description box of every video. So, in fact, the most recent one is a charity to help with efforts to alleviate suffering of those that have had to evacuate in the south of Israel because of the war that's going on. If you didn't know, there's this buffer zone, a military buffer zone around the Gaza Strip, where a number of towns, there's people that can't live there right now. It's a military zone. And so anyway, I would ask you to consider donating to these charities. Okay, I've talked to Israel 365 a number of times. I've interviewed people from there, but I did not catch this story. So we'll look into that. And then he continues, I watched your recent video on the Tabernacle Choir, President Nelson, solar eclipse. The eclipse totality on August 21st actually is fairly close to the path of the Saints' migration to Salt Lake City. And I never realized that. So let me pull up the eclipse that he's referring to. It's the 2017 eclipse, the one that went over Independence, Missouri and Adirondack. Well, yeah, it roughly does kind of go along that path. So if you go to the church's study aids for the scriptures, you have the maps that are in your quad, but they're also on the church website that show you different things having to do with the Bible, but also modern church history. And you have this one, number 6, the westward movement of the church. And so you can see here, it kind of goes like this, from Missouri to Nauvoo, from Nauvoo across Iowa, and then Nebraska, and then Wyoming, and then down into Utah. And the path of totality, it kind of does that. It goes through Missouri. It also goes through Illinois. It goes through Nebraska, Wyoming, but then it continues on past Utah. But roughly speaking, yeah, it kind of does match up with that. So that's an interesting insight. And then he says, you posted the first presidency Christmas devotional message and pointed out 7 Jesus Christ references. Let me point out 3 God, 3 Savior / Messiah, 3 Father references also. Yeah, that is interesting. Although I don't know, I feel like that's maybe just a tendency of public speaking and messaging. I'm not sure. For example, President Trump, he's really famous for saying things 3 times, like in a series of 3. I don't know if it's that. It could be significant. I'm not sure. But thank you for pointing that out. So before we get into this article, I want to give you the update on the Flood the Earth Challenge. So as of right now, we're at 7,464 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. So getting close to 7,500. 3 more people have joined the challenge since the last time I've updated it, which brings us to 805. And let's just keep going. Keep in mind one thing. the point of this challenge is it's a missionary, like a member missionary challenge. So I'm trying to track copies of the Book of Mormon that are shared with people that are not members of the church. This is meant to be a motivation to bring people into the church, you know. So we're not counting things from like a long time ago before the challenge, because that would, we're trying to like do this effort together as a result of this challenge. That's what the motivation is. So I'm not trying to track just like random shares of the Book of Mormon or copies of the Book of Mormon to people that are already members of the church, which that is a good thing to do. That's an amazing thing. Do that as well. But right here, we're just focused on people that are not members of the church and trying to give them the opportunity to receive the gospel and potentially join the church. So hopefully that clarifies things. Okay, so let's get into the article. Israel 365, leading Italian parliamentarian. Rome wants to return temple vessels to Israel. What? Is this real life? So you have this arch here, okay, which depicts when the Romans came back from destroying Jerusalem and the temple. Let me go down to it. And it shows them, you know, carrying with them the vessels of the temple. For the description for this photo, it says, in this part of Titus' triumphal procession on the Arch of Titus in Rome, the treasures of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem are being displayed to the Roman people. Okay, and prominently you can see the menorah right there. So this article is saying that a parliamentarian, an Italian parliamentarian, is talking about returning this to Israel. That's a really interesting thing to say. Okay, now some of you already know there is the Temple Institute, and they've gone through all the trouble and research to reproduce all the vessels and instruments for the temple. Everything from the breastplate of the high priest to, you know, water and wine libation vessels and everything else, harps for the Levites. Okay, you can come here to their website and go to study tools, go down to vessels, and then go down to gallery, and you can see everything. They have everything already made. They even have the Ark of the Covenant, by the way, and they have the menorah on display in this plaza in the Jewish quarter of the old city in Jerusalem, and it's protected by this glass case. It's probably bulletproof. I would imagine it looks like it probably is. So they do have everything, but wouldn't it be even more amazing if Rome did have the originals that were used in the second temple, and if those were returned? That would be pretty wild. So let's read through the article. Okay. Recently, at a large gathering in Jerusalem, a leading Italian parliamentarian said to the minister of tradition that Rome has possession of the Jewish temple's vessels and wants to return them to Israel. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, which is basically Samuel Elijah. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of Safed, which is a town in Israel, is the son of Israel's former chief rabbi, Mordecai Eliyahu, and the father of its current minister of tradition, Amichai Eliyahu. He recently told a large gathering in Jerusalem that a leading Italian parliamentarian from Italy's ruling party contacted his son, the minister of tradition. The Italian parliamentarian said that Rome has possession of the Jewish temple's vessels and wants to return them to Israel. Really? Is this real life? According to Rabbi Eliyahu, The representative of Italy's ruling party, a leading member of the national parliament, recently requested a Zoom meeting with Israel's Minister of Tradition. In the request for the meeting, he said it was very important to him, absolutely vital. When they eventually connected, this is what he told Israel's Minister of Tradition. Quote, "Every day from my office I see the Arch of Titus. It's hard to miss it. It's big and impressive, and everyone can see what's displayed on it. Jewish slaves carrying off the Jewish temple's implements into exile. 2,000 years ago, we defeated you. We destroyed your temple, massacred your people, including crucifixions, and exiled the Jews throughout the world. And I suppose you deserved it. Jewish tradition itself says this. 2,000 years have passed, and since then, you have undergone a deep change. You have returned to the land of Israel, and I suppose you also deserve to return. God promised that you would one day return, and that time is now. You've been blessed in a way we haven't. In Italy, we have one of the lowest birth rates in the world. We unfortunately compete with Spain and Japan, and for the bottom of the list. Yeah, that's true. I pulled that up, actually. According to this Wikipedia article, it has numbers from 2022 and 2023. I sorted it based on the 2023 numbers, and these numbers come from the CIA's World Fact Book. And just so you understand what these numbers are, sorry, this is a little tangent, but I think it's worth pointing out. Methodology. Crude birth rate refers to the number of births over a given period divided by the person years lived by the population over that period. It is expressed as number of births per 1,000 population. Okay? So, excuse me. So in the number one spot, as of right now, according to the CIA's World Fact Book, the number one spot is Niger. After that, Angola. And then you can see it's pretty much almost only African countries. And then it starts to get into maybe some Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, right? And so you go down, down, down. You have South America, Tonga. You have Israel at number 86, the 86th place. After that, I just pulled out some of the more notable countries. There's Mexico at 124th, Brazil. United States is just behind Australia at the 148th spot. United Kingdom at 170th. And now you start to see all these European countries. Let's see, continuing. I thought I highlighted Canada. Where is it? Where's Canada? Canada's worse than the United States. That's all that matters. Let's see, Control F, Canada. Oh, I guess I didn't. They're at the 183rd spot. I'm just kidding, Canadian followers. You know I am. There's Portugal, where my mom is from. And then after that, you have Spain, and then Italy, and then South Korea, and then Japan. And then these other countries, these are like, well, these ones don't have numbers from Palestine down. So after Japan, you have Andorra, which is basically Spain. It's a tiny country between France and Spain. It was part of my mission, but it's essentially Spain. Monaco. So you have like these little tiny micro-states. Okay, so yeah, they're pretty far down there. Yep, Italy, the 221st spot. Very sad. I've talked about this before on the channel, especially in regards to Portugal, because my entire mom's side of the family, with the exception of like a cousin that lives in Connecticut, and maybe I can't remember a couple of, we're distant. The rest of them live in Portugal, and I'm friends with some of my cousins on Facebook, and they're my age. No kids. As far as I can tell, all they do is go to concerts and football games or soccer games and travel. You know, they go and sightsee in different places. They go to, nice restaurants, and this is all that they post. on social media. This is all that they post. Just this hedonistic lifestyle of seeking pleasure, you know. And I know I'm not painting everybody that way, but that is pretty pervasive from what I've seen in Portugal and in Spain, because that's where I went on my mission, was in Spain. There's this big problem with young adults essentially being perpetual children and not having families and just constantly pursuing pleasure. And it's really sad and it makes me upset. So anyway, in the United States, we're doing better, but it's still not good. We live in just this world that, we have all the blessings in the West of technology and wealth, but it seems to me that a lot of it is actually just bringing about our downfall for the most part, as people seek for those things more than they do families. And they literally sacrifice their children, not like on an altar, but they sacrifice their children for wealth, or they don't start families until they have everything that their parents had. That, like, yesterday's, I lost the word. Yesterday's nice stuff is today's necessities. That's what we become. That's what we become. And now everyone has to get into a massive amount of debt to own a home and then have a family. And then you are paying all this money for things that you don't currently own, that you've taken a loan on. And it's limiting how many kids you can have. It's really expensive because we've become accustomed to all these. Why can't I think of the word? All these nice things, luxuries. Luxuries are now necessities, and you go back several decades, and it wasn't like that. You didn't have to I'm just going on a rant here. Okay, let's go back to the article. You've been blessed in a way we haven't. In Italy, we have one of the lowest birth rates in the world. We unfortunately compete with Spain and Japan and South Korea, by the way. And for bottom of the list, people here don't want to get married. They just want to enjoy themselves. They don't care about the next generation. There is a value crisis, and if we don't solve it, all the incredible traditions of Rome and Italy will be lost. In 20 years, there will only be old people in Italy. Immigrants from Africa will overwhelm us, and Rome and all of Italy will be no more. End quote. The Italian birth rate is about 1.2 children per woman, whereas in Israel, it's about 3. Okay, but Israel's not doing that great either, relatively speaking. Like, they're doing better, but it's not like they're at the top of the list. Quote, but Israel is a miracle. You have succeeded in educating your people. There is marriage, love, trust, and family values. The average number of children in Israel is double the average number of children in Europe. This is not just Italy's problem, it's the problem of all of Europe. Your nation has been chosen by God to teach the world values. End quote. The Israeli minister could not believe his ears. But all this was just a promo to the revelation that the Italian shared next. Quote, we have in Rome the implements of the Jewish temple, the golden menorah, and many other temple vessels and tools that we took from Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. With these vessels, you brought light into the whole world. They are with us. By keeping them, perhaps we're preventing you from fulfilling your destiny. If so, we will return them to you if you want them, to take them. It won't be easy, but if this is what will enable you to fulfill your divine role, then please, they're yours. They are laying in our cellars. We aren't doing anything with them. End quote. This admission comes over 100 years of denial by the Vatican that it possesses the temple implements. In 2013, for example, the Archbishop Giuseppe Lazzarotto of the Apostolic Nunciature in Israel wrote in a reply to an Israeli inquiry that the Vatican did not have the temple vessels. Quote, I said to myself, is this for real? Apparently so, end quote. So I guess that's supposed to be Archbishop Lazzarato saying, what? Are you really asking this? I guess you are. Since 2000, the Israeli birth rate has continuously risen. This is the exact opposite of every other developed and developing nation. Anywhere in the world, the birth rate is dropping, and with us, it is rising. It is the result of education, values, of God's blessing. Through you, I will bless all nations of the world. Fill the whole world with your glory. And all of creation will say, the God of Israel is king. Okay, so I wanted to look more into this because it said in 2013, Archbishop Lazzarato had already said that they didn't have the instruments of the temple. And there's a few things that I felt was a little bit off. Maybe it's just because it's being relayed by this rabbi, because the way that he talks is the way I've heard other Jews talk when it comes to like the criticizing of Western values, which, I'm on board with, but it feels very, I can't really picture an Italian parliamentarian talking this way. This sounds more to me like a rabbi in a rabbi's critique of Western culture, but maybe he did. I have no idea. He or she, whoever this mystery Italian parliamentarian is, because the name is not given. Also, this is, being relayed secondhand, obviously. If this did take place, the conversation was between the Italian parliamentarian and the, the minister of tradition. So it's the minister of tradition's father that's relaying this information, and it sounds like it's in kind of like rabbinic language. The whole thing with this used to light the world, give light to the world. That's like another, it says, with these vessels, you brought light into the whole world. And that from all the experience that I've had so far, everything that I've read, as well as talking to Jewish rabbis, that does not sound like something that a non-Jew would say, that with these vessels, you brought light into the whole world. In fact, during Hanukkah, that's the whole thing, is that you display the menorah so that it lights the world. It's supposed to be bringing the light of Torah to the world. That's what that's symbolically supposed to represent during the time of Hanukkah. So, I'm not saying that this didn't happen, and I hope that this is true, but I wanted to investigate a little bit further, and I came across this article from Aish.com, and I want to say that this is like a Jewish media company. Let's see, Aish, Wikipedia. I should have looked this up before I did this. No, they don't have a thing, but Aish may refer to Aish HaTorah, Orthodox Jewish outreach organization in yeshiva. I don't know, but it's some kind of Jewish company. Okay, the Vatican and the temple vessels. Okay. There's no date to this article. I have no idea, but the way that it reads, I think it's from several years ago. We talked about the fact that Archbishop, made that first statement in 2013. So anyway, is there any substance to the claim that the church has in its possession vessels from the Holy Temple? Rabbi Yonasan Stenzel of Jerusalem never imagined that his Talmud learning would lead him to explore the age-old mystery surrounding the disappearance of the vessels of the Bais Hamikdash, the Holy Temple. Are they really hidden in the catacombs of the Vatican in Rome? Rabbi Stenzel is the owner of a successful pharmaceutical company and is fortunately able to spend much of his time in learning Torah. Quote, about 3 weeks ago, I was learning Talmud with my study partner, Rabbi Hirschman, where it talks about Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Yossi seeing several objects from the Beis Hamikdash, the menorah, the table, the seats, or crown of the high priest, and the parokes or curtain, which I guess is probably the veil. They also found the grindstone of base Avitanus. I thought to myself, wow, this happened almost 2,000 years ago. I wonder where they are today. I began to do research into the topic and discovered several instances of people claiming to have seen the temple vessels firsthand. For example, there's a famous story about Rabbi Yitzhak Bakovsa Slil of Tripoli, Libya. He passed away in 1930. In his work, Beit Halakmi, he recounts having gone to Rome for a wedding where he met the Pope, who took him into the Vatican and showed him the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash, the Arch of Titus, which dates back to the 1st century, also shows the Romans carrying the menorah. To me, this obviously meant it was in their possession. Quote, being that there's a new Pope now who's supposed to be sympathetic to Jews and considers Rabbi Skorka of Argentina a good friend, I figured it would be a good time to reach out to the Vatican's representative in Israel regarding the vessels. I wrote a letter in Hebrew and had it professionally translated, then sent copies to the Vatican in Rome, as well as to the Pope's representative in Israel, Papal Nuncio Archbishop Giuseppe Lazzarotto. I also sent it via email. I'm not exactly a president or prime minister, but I figured I'd take a chance, even though it wasn't likely I'd get an answer. A Jew has to do his effort. Amazingly, I received a response via fax. Rabbi Stenzel takes exception to the fact that the papal nuncio assumed his query was an accusation of anti-Semitism because something he insists he clearly took precautions to avoid. I wrote my letter carefully and respectfully so as not to come across as accusatory in any way. I believe I accomplished that in my letter. I deliberately appealed to his heart rather than bolstering my argument with supposed proofs. I also found the nuncio's diplomatic usage of the words, quote, return to the legitimate owners, end quote, rather than to the Jews, troubling. Perhaps the church believes that they are the legitimate owners. For that reason, I found the response unsatisfactory. I'm not a professional researcher, and I don't plan to bringing a lawsuit, but I did an awful lot of research and found over 20 references to the vessels being in the Vatican. As far as the opinion that the vessels are supposed to remain hidden until Mashiach comes, he said, let them first return whatever they stole from the Jewish people, then our rabbis can sit down and figure out what to do. Just getting them to admit it or even allowing us to take photographs would be an accomplishment. They have thousands of Jewish books and manuscripts, and everything is a big secret. As for what we can do to rectify the situation, Rabbi Stenzel said, perhaps when Pope Francis visits Israel, we should greet him with large signs in English and Spanish so the international media will be aware of what's going on. Everyone should know that we haven't forgotten about the vessels. Okay. The next section is called Historical Inaccuracy. And there's some quotes here from Professor Lawrence H. Schiffman, one of the world's leading Jewish historians, a vice provost for undergraduate education at Yeshiva University. Quote, well, I'll tell you this. I do believe that most Jews think that the Vatican has them. The theory that the church somehow got them is a fascinating story in and of itself. It's also amazing that Rabbi Stenzel got an answer. It would actually be nice if the Vatican had them because then they could give them back. But the historical facts show that it would have been virtually impossible. So while it's a popular theory, I highly doubt you'll find a true scholar who has knowledge in this area who would lend it credence. According to those who have studied it, it's only a modern myth. You have to realize that the Vatican didn't exist in the 1st century of the Common Era. That's the time when, Jerusalem was destroyed and the vessels taken. Sorry. The Vatican only came into being around the year 700. And Rome was sacked by the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Saracens, or I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, and the Ostrogoths in and around the 5th century. So Whatever vessels might have been there were destroyed. The Vatican wasn't established until hundreds of years later. In fact, the popes only took up residency there in 1377. We know that the vessels were taken to Rome from the sages and in other testimony, including Josephus. The Arch of Titus clearly depicts the menorah, but there's no way the vessels made it to the Vatican, as the Vatican wasn't the successor of the Roman Empire. Okay, later on in the article, under a section called The True Secrets of the Vatican, the idea that the vessels are hidden in secret caves or catacombs is also intriguing. Explains Schiffman, quote, "There's an amazing archaeological expedition going on beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where people claim to have seen them. So far, they've uncovered an entire Roman village, and new discoveries are being made every day, but no one has ever come across any vessels. But I do admit that the idea is enthralling. A few years ago, I was in the Vatican with someone who had connections to Pope John Paul II. We had gone there to discuss a possible exhibit. When I noticed two menorahs on a shelf in his office, he asked, 'Do you want to see some Judaica we have in the Vatican? I'll take you downstairs.' Naturally, I started to salivate. We took an elevator 6 floors down to a conservation area where 10 women were working on restoring old objects. He showed me 2 pairs of tefillin that were stored in a cardboard box. 'That's all I have,' he said. 'My point is that if they had anything, they don't know about it.' Now, you might not know what tefillin is. I'm sure you've seen it before, though. It's these things right here, right? The boxes that they put on their forehead, and they have the leather band that wraps around the arm. So according to this story, this is all that they had. Tefillin are a set of small black leather boxes with leather straps containing scrolls of parchment inscribed with verses from the Torah. Tefillin are worn by adult Jews during weekday and Sunday morning prayers. They are intended to fulfill the Torah's instructions to maintain a continuous sign, quote unquote, and remembrance, quote unquote, of the Exodus from Egypt. Okay, so that's what a tefillin is. Where'd that article go? I was just there, getting lost. Okay. That's all I have, he said. My point is that if they had anything, they don't know about it. Quote, "It really shocks them and even amuses them that some Jews believe this rumor. Several years ago, when former Israeli chief rabbis Amar and Metzger visited the Vatican, they were instructed not to ask this question. One of them did, though, and while he was talking to the Pope, some of the people who work in the Vatican office were chuckling. They find it ridiculous," end quote. The next section is not true, and this is Schiffman that's talking. "It's unpopular to say this, but the Vatican just doesn't have the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. As far as the accounts of people who saw them, they appear to have no truth to them. Either they were made up, the people were delusional, or they didn't know what it was that they were seeing. It's also possible that they saw a menorah or other objects, but they were elsewhere in Rome, and they probably weren't the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. You have to remember that the Vatican didn't exist in the Rome that was mentioned in the Talmud." I do want to say something about that. So, you have to be careful when you're doing research and you come across, these accounts, even if it's like a firsthand account, because people lie. There is a whole portion of humanity that are toxic, and the way that they live their life is that they're trying to feel special, or they're trying to get attention, and they don't care about truth, and they mix truth with lies, or they exaggerate things, or they just like the attention that they get when they're like, "Oh, you know what? I was there and I saw it." Because then people are like, "Whoa, what, you did? Oh my gosh." And then they get all this attention. So some people are liars. That's not to say that anyone who has a story like this is a liar, but you have to take things with a grain of salt, unless there's some other way to verify those claims. And there's unfortunately other people that just take people for their word. So I always like to share stories and stuff on the channel, accounts of different things, but I think that we should always take it with a grain of salt. It depends on who it is that's telling the story. I do believe anytime that there's a story told by a prophet or general authority, but when it goes beyond that, maybe it could be. Not to say that I just outright don't believe it, but I take it with a grain of salt, and hopefully someday whatever that claim is will be verified. So I don't know that it matters how many people claim they saw stuff at the Vatican unless there's some way to actually verify it. I don't know. I don't know. Let's just leave it at that. Let's continue. The fact is that any quote unquote proof that exists is from the secondhand sources or written accounts that are difficult to verify. One of the more famous requests was made by Knesset member Shimon Shetreat, who publicly asked Pope John Paul II for the vessel's return in 1996. Okay, so this is a member of the legislative branch, the Knesset, right? I didn't know that this happened. Shetreat was kind enough to talk to Ami magazine about his encounter with the Pope and his feelings on the issue. Quote, I met with John Paul II in 1996 and asked that he review my request to return the menorah, which I specifically mentioned, but I never got any response. End quote. When I mentioned Professor Schiffman's insistence that the Vatican was established too many years after the fall of the Roman Empire for these items to be in the hands of the church, he said, quote, I'm not so sure that would rule it out. The power was in the hands of the Roman Empire, which then merged into the Papal States. So I don't know that you can say that, nor do I believe that the vessels were melted down. They were simply too valuable, end quote. He also theorized that the Vatican would want to keep them as a memento of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Well, I mean, that's his opinion. I think I would probably go with scholars who specialize in, that historical era and how things went down. If Rome was sacked by all these different groups and tribes, I don't know. Do you think that barbarians would stop and be like, "Oh, this is too valuable. We need to preserve this for future generations and for historic research"? I don't know that barbarians are known for their research, but I don't know. It's just I think the thing is we don't know if they are there. Then obviously, I mean. The menorah, look how big it is. It's gigantic. If it's there, somebody has got to know that it's there. Unless it's in like a gigantic box and it's in like a big warehouse area, kind of like Indiana Jones. Let's see. Indiana Jones warehouse. So I don't know, maybe it's plausible that there's some kind of like facility or something like this in the Vatican underground and someone just forgot, it was cataloged but lost to time. And it's like in this gigantic box right here. I sure hope that Italian parliamentarian knows what he's talking about, that it's in the cellars. What cellars is he referring to? In the Vatican? And how does he know? Or he or she? I keep assuming that it's a guy. I don't know. Gosh, stories like this, I want it so bad to be true. I want it so bad to be true. But it's just frustrating. Okay, continuing. So he says, I wouldn't rule it out. This is a pretty extensive article, by the way. I'll put the link for it in the description below. I just have a few more things from it that I want to share, and then we'll wrap this up. Analyzing the response of the papal nuncio. While many people have attempted to engage the Catholic Church in a dialogue about the vessels, Rabbi Stenzel is the first in recent memory to have received a response from any Vatican official. There are several interesting aspects of Lazzaroto's response. The first being his assumption that it was a veiled accusation of anti-Semitism. The second is the usage of the term, quote unquote, legitimate owners. I spoke to Father Giuseppe Lazzaroto in Israel about his response. Quote, "The whole thing is a total non-issue," he stated. "The Vatican's withholding of the vessels would be a clear sign of hostility toward the Jews, which has been contradicted more than ever during the past 50 years of our relationship. I tried to act courteously, and I felt I had to reply to him and clarify things. As you know, this story has been going around for a long time. Someone brings it up every other day. I don't know what his motivation was in writing the letter, but he deserved a response. I'm now waiting to see if he will reply. There's really no issue there." End quote. I asked the papal nuncio whether he meant the Jews. When he used the term legitimate owners. He replied, "Of course, if we had found the menorah, we would have given it back long ago. This whole thing is only an academic exercise." End quote. In fact, Father Lazzaroto told Ami he would truly love to hear of evidence of the menorah's existence, as it would be a great discovery. Okay, next section. What really happened to the vessels? Professor Schiffman explained that the nuncio's response is probably reflective of the atmosphere being encouraged by the new pontiff. Quote, "I also believe that the new pope wants to answer questions. He is new age and wants to tackle age-old questions head on. So I believe the nuncio's response is somewhat due to the influence of the new pontiff." As to what really happened to the vessels, Professor Fine added, quote, "They're either on the bottom of the ocean or on your wife's finger. Gold does not disappear. There's some indication that they were taken to Carthage or Marseille, and even a Christian legend that the menorah was taken back to Jerusalem. There's a guy who says it's buried in the West Bank. The truth is that the Palace of Peace and all the vessels it might have contained was destroyed." I don't think that we read that. I can't even remember. But there's a part in this article that talks about the fact that the instruments were taken to a Roman temple that was used to commemorate the destruction of Jerusalem. So they created a temple, to like their religion, and then they put the vessels of the Jewish temple in there for like public display. Okay, the truth is that the Palace of Peace and all the vessels it might have contained was destroyed. While some might have been salvaged and taken elsewhere, they were probably melted down. Up until recently, the Roman Jews believed the menorah was lost in the Tiber River by the Vandals. Everyone has different stories about what happened, but what really happened is what happened to everything else. It disappeared. It's an ignoble ending, but it's the truth. You should know that not only does the Vatican have the vessels, they don't have anything of their own from that period. End quote. Without question, part of our hope that the Vatican has them in its possession is simply the desire to see them again with our own eyes. We want more than anything to have a connection to our heritage. Whether the theory is true or not does nothing to tarnish the beauty of the hope that they exist. So, but this is an older story, right? This is from, I really wish that there was a date on this article. I don't know why they wouldn't put a date, but there's not one. But this was undoubtedly written before this more recent one, where there's this claim that an Italian parliamentarian spoke with the Minister of Tradition of Israel about this. Another thing that I have a question about, though, is, I don't know Italian politics. I don't know their constitution or how things work over there. But would a member of parliament have the authority to say something like that? Like, you know what? You guys need to take it. Here, it's yours. I feel like that wouldn't be that person's call. Unless they're like relaying a message by those who are in authority to release the artifacts, the instruments to the Jews. You know, because it's like, I imagine it's like you wouldn't have, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that you would have like a member of Congress, for example, someone from, let's say, the Senate. I don't think that you'd have a senator that would be like, you know what, we have this in the Smithsonian, but here you go, take it if you want it. I don't know how things work, but I don't think that it works like that. So if a senator did relay that message, then it must have been the result of like a process of the people who are in authority of those things agreeing and going through the legalities or whatever of releasing that to the rightful owner. Does it make sense? So, but anyway, I hope this is true. Hopefully we'll see something about this in the near future. This article, I should have said, is from October 23rd. So we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you, Richard Jordan, for sending this to me. And now I have this on my radar. And if there's any updates, I'll do a video about it. It'll make big news. It'll make really big news, I think, if that happens. So I may not be the first one to bring that to you whenever that occurs. Okay, but that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.